Okay.
Yeah, so KBRA, the company that I work for, has been sponsoring the meetup for a while now, and it's aligned to the objectives of the meetup, and the people that we want to interact with and speakers that we talk to are aligned with the ideals of how we want to run the engineering team. Small empowered teams aligned to products, making stuff happen. So it's good. I mean, KBRA has a few open positions. One that I'll highlight for this context. So if you know anybody, please pass them along, is for our platform team. So our platform team kind of sets up the environment for all the dev teams to do work. So they kind of run the container swarm, or and there's a soon to be Kubernetes offering coming out. They interact with and run GitLab and the CI/CD pipelines we have. They help teams with Datadog for APM. Help teams do postmortems, help them basically be successful. So if you're going to use the team topology lexicon, they're kind of both a platform team and an enablement team inside of KBRA. And we have 2 open positions to fill. They're really, like, if folks that are want to get engaged with teams, want to help teams be successful, know about infrastructure as code, know about running containers at an enterprise level, they're the team to work for. Chris Bryce, who's on, I see, runs the team. So if there's comments or questions, just reach out to me through LinkedIn, or reach out to him through LinkedIn, or if you know somebody, let us know. But yeah, I guess a little bit more about KBRA. They're a rating agency with the mission of doing better than what the rating agencies did before. They were started 10 years ago, kind of after the credit crisis, and our founder, Jules Kroll, said, it can be done better, and that's where KBRA stands. So, they're a very interesting position of, trying to tackle some giants out there, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, and, really service an underserviced market. So it's a great, company to work for. And, we're looking for talented people that want to join the mission.
Thank you, Anthony. Our speaker tonight is James Gifford. He's an Agile Lean coach, and he's also one of the co-founders and the board member of Agile Uprising. I first met him years ago at the Heart of Agile conference in Pittsburgh, where he was wearing, I think, yellow camo, and had attached sticky notes dispensers, which certainly made an impression. But he's a great guy, and I'm sure the talk tonight will be awesome. So without further ado, take it away, James.
Awesome. Are you seeing the right screen? You're not seeing the freaking slide view, the presentation screen, please.
Oh, it's good.
All right. Yeah. So I'm James Gifford. Nick hit on a lot of it. The only thing that's really changed since Nick met me was I'm now a certified pro Kanban trainer. So I hooked up with Dan Vacanti and Colleen Johnson, and kind of helping pursue some of their views on Kanban, which was kind of getting away from the old Anderson Blue Book kind of way of thinking. The belt, he's actually referring to a utility belt that's called the Scramando belt. That's kind of where the Scramando name comes from. Is this stupid utility belt that I wear when I'm in the office that does have Post-it note dispensers on it. And it was yellow camo with a yellow shirt. It was pretty mint. So, and I do host the Agile Uprising podcast, and kind of started that thing 5 years ago. We do have a Discord that we have roughly about 320 people on right now, kind of talking about Agile and technical practices and all kind of just shenanigans and mayhem. So it's a good time. At the end of the presentation, there's some information on it if you guys get interested and want to check it out. So tonight we're gonna talk about the pairing 9 box, and kind of really, I spend a lot of my time. I haven't written code professionally in like the last 8 years. So I'm useless now. But I spent a lot of time working with leaders, working with different groups of people, trying to help them learn about agility, how to create, working environments that are conducive to Agile. And so I spent a lot of my time floating around in the leadership circles. And so some of the stuff that we've been working on for a couple of years is, helping leaders make that pivot from ultimately firefighters, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the presentation, but really focusing in on leadership and creating culture and things like that, and being a advocate for technical agility. So while I can't sit down with somebody, I know enough to help sell or advocate or make cases in the circles that I end up getting stuck in. To be honest, I have not run this presentation. This will be the first time it's ever been run other than me standing there talking to the mirror. So it's not like the last one I showed up to in 2018 and talked about metrics. So here we go. I have a lot of, when we did the Agile Manifesto Signer series, we got a lot of just old stuff from Alistair and a couple different things from Andy Hunt and things like this. But one of the interesting things they had sent over, and it's kind of resonated with me since, I've had this since about 2017. And this is one of those things that I never really looked at the manifesto in this light until I saw it. And then I kind of had this light bulb moment. But if you kind of look through this, and the way they originally intended it was that there was a slant towards customers, there was a slant towards managers, and then a slant towards the team. And so, if we're really focusing on those principles that they called out as the slant to the managers, comes back to the build the projects around motivated individuals and the environment. The most effective method for conveying information is face-to-face, whether that is video, in person. The digital world has changed things, but I still would rather be on video and having a conversation with somebody than talking on a Polycom or my cell phone, even if I can't be in person. So for some of you, that might not matter, but I still think face-to-face communication is important. Really helping people focus on the right metrics. It is primary measure of progress is working software. All the rest of it is more just telemetry that helps you steer an organization or spot problems or look for places to kind of improve. And then the sustainable pace. I mean, that is something that I have seen many organizations just suck at. I haven't found the silver bullet to fix that yet. But so as we look at this call to leaders, we're really trying to help them make the great pivot. So if you look at traditionally how software managers and leaders got into where they were a firefighter. They were somebody that was really they were competent at their job. And it's not that, they were the best software or the developer or the best leader, but they were the people that were there that they could count on, that they fought fires, they got things done. And that was how you kind of moved up the food chain and ladder. And as we're talking to, as we look to make this great pivot, we're now expecting leaders to become a teacher, a mentor, somebody that kind of grows talent. And I would be cliche, and we'll throw a sensei in there to go with our shuhari. But there is a major pivot for somebody that's been in a role where they got there because they fought fires well and got things done, and that's what they were put on a pedestal, and that's how they got their management job. It wasn't because they were the best coach at helping people learn to develop software better. It wasn't they were the best person at improving the system. And so this is why I call it the great pivot is you're looking for people to make a gigantic transition. And like all change, this is super uncomfortable for people. And this is kind of some of the biggest fear and pain that I experience when I'm working with leaders is making a transition to a job that I have no skills potentially in. I can write code, I can tell people how to solve a problem, but I don't necessarily know how to sit down with them and actually help them manage their career raise them up, give them transferable skills. And that's where a lot of my time has been spent. And that's kind of where we're trying to do with is what we've been doing with the Pairing 9 box, is to kind of give them some tools. So when we look at this, there's some prerequisites that I found for this stuff to really actually make it happen. And until you can really get some of these prerequisites out of the way, you're going to struggle with these types of activities, because you're kind of always kind of competing with that idea of creating in the right environment, growing talent. So in this, a lot of organizations really looking at their matrix management. And for what matrix management, if you haven't been exposed to matrix management or heard it referred to, it's really about, you're a group of individuals serving and your book of work is coming from somebody that isn't your manager. So in a matrix environment, you could have people from 4 different managers on the team working together, and they're farmed out to come together as a team and really deliver on a book of work that isn't coming directly from their manager. And so when we look at that matrix management, we're really looking to shift that empowerment to either the teams owning their own destiny and they're having the accountability for delivery, or in a lot of companies, I'm working at a lot of big organizations that still have multiple teams working on things. So we have some level of program management involved. So putting that accountability for delivery on program management. And I will preference that with Agile program management. There is a fundamental difference between Agile project management or program management and old school PMBOK, PMI, donkey poop. So I'd love to talk to you guys about some of that at some point in time. But the next kind of thing that we look at as a prerequisite here is shifting where the cheddar comes from. You want to look at shifting people's compensation for what they're being rewarded for. So when we look at kind of what does this new world look like, where a manager is really that mentor and coach, and you've taken away their delivery. So now they don't have delivery as an accountability. How do you compensate and shift, to a better compensation model for them? And so when we look at that, we're really we help companies understand how to switch their incentive models for growing and hiring talent. As a new modern leader in this world, we're having them shift to focusing on having to grow and hire talent. And it's not always hire the most brilliant, bright person. I'd rather not hire the brilliant jerk and hire somebody that has the desire to learn and grow and grow them into a role. And because I hate working with the brilliant jerk, it generally self-destructs a lot of teams. So I'm looking for managers that can see that, help them be able to spot talent. And then if they don't have they have the right personality and an aptitude, I would rather hire that person and use that management to help bring them up. We want to talk about team enablement. When I'm talking about team enablement, I'm talking about helping the organization remove impediments. So being willing to go work with a cross-functional group of people to work with your procurement staff or procurement group, so you can actually get the tools that you want and need without waiting 6, 12, however long that horrible process of legal and things like that. It could be, really helping to work with leaders on how to get work to the product teams better with things that are outside of their control. But they're really focused on optimizing team enablement. And when a lot of this stuff, when we start really digging into this and we get people latched onto it, this is where we start to really kind of bring in systems thinking. And so then start actually showing them that your organization is nothing but a huge, gigantic mess of interconnected systems, and then introducing them to some of the theories of constraints to help them enable flow through the organization. They're here to create culture. When we have, the last company I was at was a company of acquisitions, and we had a Bangalore development center. So because we've acquired every single company, the entire company was literally nothing but acquisitions. There was a overarching corporate culture, corporate values, but every single location had their own set of values, their own set of culture. There was no overarching kind of company. So when you felt like you got hired, you feel like you get hired into this corporate values and a good corporate culture, but you're literally in Beirut at some of the locations. So really working with the managers to kind of create and cross-pollinate some of that culture that ties into what we're talking about with the Agile Manifesto. They're there to create that culture as a sustainable pace, like helping us while they're not accountable for delivery, but being able to push back on people when your team members or your employees are being jammed against the wall. It's like, no, like there's options. There's moving the date, there's cutting scope. Those are the two levers in Agile. So helping them kind of fight that culture for you. And then as that manager, starting to, shifting that decision to the lowest responsible level, which is, I didn't say the lowest levels. I'm saying the lowest responsible levels, because there are decisions that individuals shouldn't be able to make in an organization because it's not necessarily responsible. But we want to push as much of that decision making down to the team within that reasonable level. When we talk about that, some of that is giving people clarity too on some of that vision and strategy and why we're doing things. And I'll hit on this in a little bit as we kind of move it down into the presentation. So when we talk about this, we've talked about these kind of prerequisites, helping people to make the pivot. We've been really working on a leadership curriculum over the long haul. For some reason, my boss won't let me call it the Long Island Iced Tea of Leadership, because it's a whole bunch of blend of just these different ideas that help breed and populate this kind of what we're trying to do. I don't know why he won't let me call it the Long Island Iced Tea of Leadership, but and when you look at these things, the servant leadership, hopefully you all know what servant leadership is. When we talk about the first team, this is all that concepts that come out of that book, 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. It's in the format of the goal, so it's an entertaining story as much as it is a learning opportunity. We're going to talk a little bit about intent-based leadership, which is David Marquet. Management 3.0 is Jürgen Appello. Great stuff. A lot of great things around team empowerment, delegation, different things like that. You'll find some great works in there. There's these ideas of the 4 levels of trust. Team empowerment often comes with the ability to build trust and feel like you can trust your team. The stuff around the responsibility process, that's Christopher Avery, and it's really one of the last 2 here in the list here for extreme ownership as well. Both of these are tools and techniques to help create accountability and taking responsibility for what you're doing. And a lot of teams in the early days, as you're kind of making these pivots, there are a lot of folks that I interact with that struggle with accountability and or taking responsibility for their actions instead of playing the blame game of, oh, it was Susie the tester's fault. No, you could have probably done something in that situation that it wasn't Susie the tester's fault. So when we look at this, if you guys have been living under a rock for the last couple of years, this is a best-selling. It's David Marquet. He wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, and it's a bit dry. I'm gonna give you the book review if you haven't read it. It's a bit dry, but there's a lot of good value in it. It's better on audio book when you're commuting for an hour each way, but that doesn't really happen a whole lot. So David Marquet wrote this book. Really, the premise of it is really his journey in time in the Navy and turning the worst submarine in the fleet to the best submarine in the fleet, applying these leadership concepts that really kind of, a lot of people will kind of reference this as servant leadership, but it's it's nuanced and different. And I actually gravitate to a lot of this more than actual servant leadership at this point. So when we look at what David Marquet is kind of talking about here in his 6 principles of intent-based leadership, you know, it's a 250-page book to get these 6 points. But so a lot of what he's talking about is, you know, our objectives to achieve greatness, not avoid errors. So from this standpoint, it's really about leaders learning how to talk and interact with their team members, the people that report to them, and instead of having that language and the ways of talking about things, instead of chastising them for making errors, it's not about chastising them. It's more about kind of how can you help, or how can we repeat that or stop that from happening again. In order to achieve greatness, we need people to think. So it's how do you help people think? And it kind of gets into things around stress and actually looking at different ways to remove stress from the way our interactions are as leaders or managers with the folks we work with. For people to think, leaders must give control and not take it. And so a lot of this starts to kind of get into that around being able to move that decision making down to the lowest levels. So at the individual levels, leaders move people up the leadership ladder by giving intent, not instruction. And so when he's got this whole kind of leadership ladder, and it's down in the appendix to this deck. And if we get some time at the end, I'll show you. It's a pretty neat kind of diagram. But what this is really aimed at is cutting through some of that learned helplessness that you have in your organization, where the individual kind of shows up and they're always just like, kind of tell me what to do. This is really about helping them and giving you techniques to stop that and help them come to you with, this is what I intend to do, and then allowing you to kind of give them feedback one way or another, or ask some questions to kind of make sure you have the right clarity there. And we need to, at an organizational level, leaders need to push the authority to the information, not the information to the authority. So this is really about empowerment, of really allowing you to make the decision where the information is the most relevant. So if you're the guy monitoring the server and there's problems and you need to, you know, reboot or make a risky decision to kind of save something, not that that's really a thing too much anymore, you have the information to make that decision and have you're going to potentially know the best solution to do that. And when he's talking about this stuff, he's talking about people with the keys to the nuclear reactor that is powering a nuclear submarine, and empowering them to make decisions that could have catastrophic events, and, you know, basically turn them into a big smoking radioactive ball in the sea. So to ensure success, the distribution of controls to the 2 supporting pillars of technical competency and organizational clarity must be in place. And this is where we're going to spend a good bit of, this is where we're going to kind of spend some time here. And then our focus is to change the environment, not the people. So it goes back to, how do we improve the environment? How do we keep changing the environment for the betterment of the people working in it, instead of trying to change the people? And now obviously there's a balancing act in here around, a lot of times when we're really working with leaders and things like this on these topics, we're really kind of putting in some guardrails, getting people more focused on outcomes, and giving them some kind of parameters in there to not just as safety bumpers. Like when I take my 10-year-old bowling, we still need to put the bumpers up, but that's for a good reason. And then one of the ways we're going to end up doing this is getting people to act our way to new thinking, as opposed to thinking their way to new action. And when he's talking about this, he's really talking about, like, we're trying to get people to go through the motions and kind of continue to get that built in as muscle memory. And as opposed to just spending a lot of time thinking about it. It's more about doing. And that's why a lot of times when I'm working with agile teams and things like that, I'm okay if we're going through the motions of Scrum and it's some taco agile in the beginning and we're really only going through the motions, because over time, as they're going through those motions, you can have some deeper discussions around why and really get them kind of changed around to different mindsets. But if you never get them started, never getting them to kind of go through those motions and kind of continue to coach them through those motions, you're never going to change. And I know I've been rambling on here for a minute, so I'm going to pause and see if we got any folks out there in the ether that would like to chime in and ask any kind of questions.
Yeah, I have one. I think, you know, I need to spend a little bit more time on 3B in terms of, you know, what that means. But can you do you have like a crystallized version of like how that is in practice in terms of like a software engineering kind of model?
So in the software industry, we're needing to push the authority down to the information. So when we've done this, you know, it's a lot of times it's really about making decisions around the way we're going to potentially tools we're going to bring in, the way we're like, so if you're, and I wish I knew more about the cloud these days. I need to upskill on that. But around a lot of this is kind of like looking at containering and different kind of structure around that, instead of somebody like the leader dictating kind of your strategies or having the architect just, you know, saying, no, this is the way you need to do it. It's more about you're the people working in it. You're the people that are seeing the traffic. You've got the information on you know, what the system's
I got
doing,
you.
usage. And you should be so you've built the telemetry in, you're monitoring it, you have the information, and it's like, we need to change something because you're bleeding money out of your rear end with AWS. But if we re-architect some of XYZ, we could save that money. You should be able to make that decision because you can see it, you understand hopefully you understand the price deals they worked out with AWS.
Gotcha.
And you're able
So
to make that intelligent decision.
And maybe in a different way, it's kind of like having the stop button on the assembly line
Yep,
on the floor.
code. Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, and when in the examples he gives in the book is really about IBM salespeople being able to sell. And so I'm a customer associate, and I'm out meeting with you, and you guys are saying, well, I want this and I want that, and I want you guys to come in and do this, and it's going to be, you know, we're wanting to pay $1 million. Okay, great. In the old world of IBM, they'd have to take that back. Their leaders would have to mull it over and then really kind of, you know, work it out and negotiate, and they'd lose deals because they were spending so much time going back and forth negotiating, where it was like, if they had simply opened it up and said, look, you have the information, you're smart, you've been servicing these accounts. If you think it's a good deal and it's going to be the right money for the company, just go ahead and sign the deal, like up to X amount of spend. Like if it was over like $10 million, you had to come back. But anything below that, it was just sign the deal and let's go. Let's bring it in. So hopefully that helps.
Yep. Thanks.
Anybody else out there? No. All right. So when we look at this, you know, we're talking about distributing the control to the two supporting pillars. Technical competency and organizational clarity are a must. So when we talk about this, it's about distributing control around clarity. We're talking about the teams have the understanding of the organizational and team goals. So they need to understand, just kind of like that in that example with IBM, like you need to understand what the organizational goals are. You know, so if it's sales goals, it's projections, like you need to understand what those are. Or if you're working for a healthcare company, you might have organizational goals to bring on new markets, to increase your revenue, sales, things like that. You need to understand, have that vision of where the company's going from the organizational and the team level goals. So you as an organization may have goals to reduce defects, to get to 0 defects this year as a stretch goal. But like your aspirational thing is everything that we're doing should have this mindset where we're trying to reduce our quality issues by X%. Like you need to understand the mission, the why, so that you have the right information to make the best decisions possible that are aligned with those goals. These things could come in the form of OKRs, good old traditional SMART goals. There's so many different flavors of this these days that it's hard to kind of pinpoint it to one, but really, do we have the clarity? And for teams, a lot of this clarity could be around the customer. What is the customer's roadmap? Why are we doing things? Especially if you're using like a problem roadmap. What are my customers dealing with? What problems are we trying to solve for them and why? And that's where we're really focusing in on the overall clarity. And that's what that's really meaning. And that's why I'm really always saying that we need to shift to sets of outcomes and be outcome oriented. So when we really start to work with teams and leaders and things like that, we're really helping them shift to coming up with outcomes as opposed to dictating hard goals. Especially when we're in the middle of doing some quarterly planning at this company because they're big and they need a lot of things. I'm not forcing them into some kind of model, but what I'm kind of establishing is a set of outcomes for good kind of continuous refinement of work to get to the team that helps them, help you balance the demand on the team to kind of be forward looking as well as being able to work in the moment and get things to the customer. So instead of dictating to them how to do it, I align them around a set of outcomes during that quarter. So we run 6 sprints of development, and then we do a week of like 2 days of planning, a half day of team building / an agile assessment, and then 2 days of innovation or learning. So you have, leading up to that planning week, we're on a 12-week cycle. So how do we basically get ready for that next kind of quarter? What kind of experiments do we want to run? What kind of work what's experimental work? What versus like keep the lights on versus building on the actual roadmap? We want to be able to kind of see what that is so we can adjust forecasts if we have to go back and get money because we're doing kind of a venture funding as a way to fund things. They could go back and get funding. But instead of forcing them to have the actual, here's your, take the cookie cutter. Now we're trying to get them focused on the outcomes, and we're having a lot of better results. People are co-creating. People are kind of starting to get used to seeing some of these problems. And then from there, we need to have the technical knowledge and skill to do the job. So for you guys as software engineers, developers, different things like that, there's so many technical skills and things that you need to learn. But do you have so I try to limit it to, do you have enough of the technical skills and knowledge to be able to support what you're working on? So whatever application, website, sky's the limit there. Embedded systems, do you have the skills and knowledge to work on that spectrum of work that you're assigned to at that point in time? And so that's really right there, that kind of opens the door to a whole lot of things that people, it's ambiguous. Do you have the skills? There's a lot of resumes that are padded. From an agile coaching standpoint, I'm really looking at, do they have the technical skills and knowledge to be able to coach on XYZ topics? I really need a technical agile coach. It's clearly not going to be me. I don't have the skills anymore. But if I'm hiring for that skill set, I want to make sure that they can have the technical skills, different things like that. So, because we've kind of been noodling around, there's something as a leader, as a manager, and especially in large companies, there's the good old fashioned traditional 9-box of something, and hopefully you've never had to experience this. I have, as somebody that's had a large number of teams in my life, but doing traditional succession planning. And the leaders go through this exercise almost on a yearly basis of, looking at their people's potential versus their performance. And they're really trying to look at their staff and put them kind of into these buckets around where do they fall in this spectrum. And really you're kind of starting to, you want to get in that upper right 4. So feature star, key player, consistent star, current star. Like that's really the sweet spot in this diagram. So when we started looking at some tools and kind of creating some of this stuff for managers and them to really help them manage talent, grow talent, really start to be able to empower and grow teams, we kind of we started with this because it was something they were used to. It's something they're used to. It kind of started, we did it because it was going to hopefully break down the barrier to entry on these kind of concepts. So from there, what we ended up doing was plotting out our clarity and our technical skills. And so what we ended up doing was we pivoted to the 9-box for technical competency and user needs and usage. Now that bottom axis at your company, you could change it out for something totally different. But for us, we talked in user needs because we were trying to operate in a customer problem kind of roadmap as opposed to the traditional feature roadmap. One, trying to break down some other challenges in the organization. Now, when we look at this, for simplicity, we focused on features. You could focus on anything that you wanted, but our first pass and kind of where we stopped and not died as in it went away or didn't work. It was more like we didn't pursue it any further because it works for the company. And they're not really totally out of the feature factory kind of mindset there. So we started with what worked and really kind of have been focusing in on leveraging this at the feature level. So when we talk about technical competency, this is something that you and your company is going to have to define on your own. But when we did it, we focused on, ensuring that people know that on the low side, it means that they're not proficient at development skills, but, we treat it as an individual that is more specialized instead of a specializing generalist. Which happens as we breed cross-functional functionality within the teams. So we're really looking at, these are really people that are really just specialized right now. They may have 1 or 2 special skills, and that's their sweet spot. We kind of labeled out, the medium levels, more focused on specializing generalists and have, more software development technologies under their belt. And then, really high level focus are really full feature. Like they could support it from the software through the infrastructure and kind of build and develop there. And I run into, and maybe it's just because I work at some kind of crappy companies, I don't run into many folks that are really full stack and go all the way from the software to the infrastructure in too many places in one individual. I mean, full stack developers must just not grow on trees. But so it's really about you guys and your company defining what works. This is what worked for the last couple companies we've used it at as our baseline because they were sold and bought into the buzzwords of agility. I will say something about the specializing generalist. It's highly loaded and we're not really successful with it based on the organizational culture, which most companies I go to seems to be the norm. If you have different experiences, I'd love to hear about them because it's, for me, it's become more of a unicorn than the norm. But what we were able to do is get folks willing to specialize on specializing generalist enough. So we really had, so when we kind of started getting into a lot of the flow and kind of teaching teams about the flow of value through the organization, they were valuing that idea of flow. And so they would cross skill enough that they would enable for the body of work coming through their team to really just keep the flow of work moving through the team so the customer was getting the benefit. It wasn't about their need to learn or grow new skills or things like that. And then the other thing that we kind of did was we had a non-negotiable that quality was everybody's job. So there was a real culture of throw it over the wall and let the QA folks kind of handle it. So we ended up making QA's job, quality was everybody's job. So it didn't matter. Developers were doing testing, developers were writing automation. We also used that quality was everyone's job as an opportunity to start an SDET program to have our quality folks upskill from being more manual testers to actually being able to write the automation. So we had some synergies and things like that. And the QA folks that were doing manual testing were more excited about learning these new skills and picking up the different automation techniques than the developers were learning a new language or messing around with things like that. And that might be very offensive for a lot. I realize that we're at an XP meetup and there's still a lot of software developers and folks in the audience. So I will apologize for that. You guys just don't beat me up in the parking lot afterwards. So when we talk about user needs and usage, low to high, I'm going to give you the consultant answer. It depends. I think this is one of those things that's really kind of ambiguous for a lot of companies, and it's a co-creation moment. We really were in the process of trying to focus people shifting from traditional roadmaps to problem-based roadmaps. So what's the customer need? What problem do they have? What are we trying to solve for them to kill the feature factory? We're still trying to dismantle the feature factory to some degree of success, but there's still work to be done there. And we haven't found the one thing that's going to kind of have that light bulb come on. When we talk about usage, we're really starting to focus and make the pivot to customer journey maps. And if you're not familiar with one of those, it's actually showing your customer's journey through a specific flow. So if you were doing banking software, and we all hopefully you have debit cards, you're going to go maybe online to check on your balance. Well, I can go online and check my balance. I can go on the mobile web and check my balance. I can go on the app on my phone and check my balance. I can go to the IVR and check my balance. I could go to an ATM and check my balance. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at our customer's journey through our technology. And in this case, we would be looking at what is that customer journey through those experiences so that you can have a kind of less disjointed experience as you're moving through that life cycle. One of the other things that we really found a lot of value in is when we were working on some e-com platforms, is helping people make those transitions from I'm browsing, I'm looking, I'm searching, I'm now in an alternate product, checking on maybe some inventory and stock, and then I need to go back around from there or from my cart and back into the shopping experience. So really being able to kind of flow that out and look at the experience through a bunch of these different routings really generally creates a better customer experience. And that's how we kind of define usage and use those types of tools to really navigate that. So generally when we work with these, we generally co-create with our product owners or product management group. I know product management it's kind of loaded. Agile Twitter's on fire right now about the war between product owner versus product management. And then we want to build a shared understanding with the team. Once you kind of understand this, it goes back, Ken, again to that clarity. We're building a shared understanding around what the problem roadmap is, what these customer journeys are, what problems we're trying to solve, what are those outcomes that we ultimately need to deliver on as an organization. Do we have any questions before I move on? No. Oh, I skipped a slide. So when we want to fill in the old 9 box, we got danger. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. We need to do this with safety in mind or all is lost. You know, I've seen everything from a manager trying to take this and stack rank their team. Managers get a hold of these things, turn them into weapons, sharpen them into spears. So, you know, I just highly recommend that you abandon this in the instance that it becomes weaponized, or it will be damaging. So when we look at the assess and align directly on the 9 box, once people have a clarity on the definition, it's been socialized between the teams, the individuals, the managers. I like to let teams and them self-evaluate and plot themselves directly on the 9 box. Let the managers plot themselves where they think the individuals are on the 9 box, lay the 2 over together, and then have a facilitated session on the delta with a third party. Like, no team and manager facilitating this discussion together. You need somebody there to kind of play that moderator and mediator between some of these things, because they can get heated and they can be damaging. So that's why we want that third party there that has deep facilitation skills to help monitor this. But a lot of in a healthier relationship, there's some really interesting and deep conversations that can come out of these conversations in that delta session, and they can be really highly productive. And then another way we've done this is really, and it's a slightly safer way to do it, but filling out the traditional skills matrix, like we need these 20 skills to be able to deliver this. Let's start plotting out where your skill gaps are, or where your skills are and where their gaps are. And then we use that as the plot for the technical piece of it. And then what we've often done is, a lot of the places I've worked, there is some level of like customer certification. Like, you've gone through the training program and now you're certified on the product to use it. We've actually gone and put the team through this training and then had them take the certification test to kind of understand the domain and what the customers are doing. It's a lot safer, but I don't think that you get the same results as you do by actually having people sit down and have a conversation. But it is dangerous, and this is kind of one of those damaging things. So from there, you know, what we want to help the teams, and we're using this as the manager, is for the teams and individuals to kind of reach that sweet spot. And so, you know, we really want to have that kind of where we have the right, you know, at least a medium kind of situation where we know that we have medium competency and knowledge. And this is where it starts to really be able to kind of help people move those decisions down to these lower levels, because people are feeling more confident in their abilities to support these products. So in this kind of instance, we were looking at this particular feature. We're looking at this kind of team. You know, we have some folks that are on the lower end of our user needs and our technical competency. So Tom might just have one skill, really kind of be in that lower market, not have a lot of product knowledge because he's probably new to the company, might be a fresher, as the folks in India would like to say. So might be right out of school, done a software internship, and now he's here at the company. So if I'm looking at this, obviously Zeke is our highest kind of skilled individual. And so, I'm not here to debate the merits of paired programming or it's valuable or, people hate it. I advocate for pair programming, not all day, every day, but I do advocate for coming together in pairs and working and solving problems together. So these are kind of opportunities where we could pair Zeke with Tom and really start to focus on that relationship there to help Tom kind of bring that together. And we're looking at this from a manager standpoint to be able to help kind of encourage potentially some of these pairs. I found often that I have a lot, if you don't rotate pairs or things like that, people tend to gravitate to each other. I have a team now that the two people that pair, you can always find them together. They don't really rotate. They just like to work together. They get a lot of stuff done and it's pretty high quality, but nobody else is getting the benefit of their experience. So looking at this from that standpoint, we could pair them up with Zeke. But if we try to pair everybody up with Zeke or Lisa to kind of bring up their skills, we're going to burden them down potentially without, that mental load, kind of always transferring knowledge and kind of upskilling. We're going to kind of end up burning those folks out in those areas. So what we want to kind of do is look at what are we trying to level up and what's the kind of importance of it. So another kind of way to look at it is Lisa is lacking in that product knowledge. So instead of sending her up to Zeke to work with, we could pair her up with Beth. And then there's more of a symbiotic kind of relationship there where Lisa could be that tester. So that tester we talked about that was doing a lot of manual testing, been at the company 20 years, really knows, has been there since the beginning and creation of this functionality, been testing it, working with the business folks, really knows the customer space. We could partner her out with Beth because Beth has a lot of deep knowledge in test automation and things like that. And so now Beth and Lisa can work together and kind of learn to build those skills. So that's going to kind of wrap up where I'm at for the old presentation here. I'd like to kind of open it up to questions or thoughts around kind of this idea of using this 9-box here as a way to kind of help people make decisions on pairs.
So just one question. I feel like I have a memory of a commentary about like team members, right? So, assuming that you might have some upcoming work or whatever that is, falls in the lower left. And, you're trying, you have with a decent read that you're not able to do the work, right? You don't have the technical competency. And maybe even don't have the ability to get to a high understanding of what's being done. Is hiring or a potential move here, or would it be training? What's like, how do you move up or over when, like there's just not a path forward with the skills on the team?
So we've done the hiring. We've done some one of the things we did was we knew that there were some other groups that had some more talented folks that could help the team. So we did a casting call. And I don't necessarily advocate for the split and seed kind of split a team, good group of team, high functioning team, and put them out in the wild. But we will pull some honorary team members. So put a casting call out in that kind of messaging that group of folks from other parts of the organization that have the skills that we needed and say, can you become an honorary team member for the next quarter, the next 6 months? And really kind of having them come and shepherd and help. We've had it where the product owner was the most senior person. So we went, or like most knowledgeable about the space. And so maybe they're not going to necessarily be able to write the code as efficiently, but for the problem context, we've had them pop onto the team and then supplemented their capacity with an analyst to help fill the shoes of like some of the more not so awesome work. so that they had that product knowledge. But we've definitely gone out and hired as a way to kind of close some of these gaps as well. I try to look for internal options before going out and trying to recruit, because the cost of staffing is generally significantly high. Not so much the salary aspects is what it is, but there's that huge problem of like getting a rec posted, recruiting, time lost from people interviewing, things like that. Unless you got a super short lead time to seat. But yeah, hiring is an option.
Gotcha. Thanks.
We got anybody else? Clearly this was a boring as shit topic, so appreciate it. No, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to me yam for about an hour. If you guys would like to connect, you can always find me online. You can find me on Twitter at Scramando. You can email me at james.gifford@scramando.com. I will put this, all the stuff I've ever shared, like any meetups that I share decks and content at, I have a shared Google Drive folder that I give everybody kind of read access to. So I will give Nick the link to this as well, if you ever want to go back out and look at the content. You can always find me on the Agile Uprising Discord. For those of you who don't know what Discord is, it's basically Slack, but free. It doesn't have threads, which is dumb. It's coming though. But it's essentially like Slack, but free. A lot of gamers use it. There's some great audio channels and different fun things that are on there, but it's a pretty good community. A lot of great places to kind of interact, especially if you want to complain about your job. We got a vent channel that is just pure gold. So that way you can read it and realize your company's not as effed up as everybody else's company. We have the podcast. It's out on most of the podcast platforms. You can find the shows out there that are online. If you're looking for people that want to know about Agile history, I would direct you to the podcast. We did interview 14 of the original signers as part of a project when we first launched this thing 5 years ago. So there's over 13 hours of audio of, the manifesto signers talking about what they were doing pre-Agile, the Snowbird, and then some commentary on what the industry's had done to Agile. And then
It's really good. I would recommend it if people are interested.
And then for those folks that you're trying to want to get them educated on the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto, we did the 12 days of Agile and sequenced it up with the Christmas time release. There's a lot of good content in there, especially for people new that are really trying to get into understanding this stuff. So with that, I really thank you for your guys' time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
It's always weird when you're presenting. You can't really see the chat.